human away immediately as to where in the body this parasite ends up located. Now, there are actually very many different species of Paragonimus that infect people around the world. Everything I have to say is going to be applicable to all of these. The behavior, the biology is all very similar. One of the most important in terms of the numbers of people affected is Paragonimus westermanni, which again has an Asian distribution. But there are others found in Asia and also elsewhere around the world. So in some parts of Central and Western Africa, there are species that are present, and also in the New World. In fact, there's even a species found in North America. I have a little bit more to say about that in a minute or two. So these are relatively small flukes, more along the size of the Opisthochus and Formicus that we discussed, about 1 centimeter or so in length. Here's a map sort of summarizing some of that distribution again. East Asia, principally Paragonimus westermanni, and then some other species elsewhere. So here's the life cycle. We'll start again with the adult flukes. So the adult flukes live within cysts that form around them. The body has basically a reaction to the presence of the fluke and forms a cyst around it. They live in cysts in the lungs that communicate via little fistulae with the airways. And the flukes produce eggs that pass up the bronchial tree, sort of swept along by the mucociliary escalator until they end up in the pharynx, and then they're either expectorated, spat out, or swallowed, in which case they pass through the digestive tract and leave the body in feces. When they arrive in a freshwater environment, they hatch, releasing a miracidium. That affects a snail. There's development that occurs in the snail. And then a cercaria emerges from the snail. So very similar to the other life cycles that we've discussed. But then once the cercaria emerges, there's an important difference. So it infects a second intermediate host, just like Clonorchis and Opisthochus. But in the case of Paragonimus, the second intermediate host is not a freshwater fish, it's actually a freshwater crustacean. And various species of freshwater crustacean, freshwater shrimp, freshwater crabs, crayfish, things like that, these can act as second intermediate hosts for the Paragonimus life cycle. So the cercaria invades these species of crustacean and becomes a metacercaria inside that host. And humans and other definitive hosts become infected when they eat raw or undercooked infected crustacean. Okay? And so the metacercaria is ingested, it passes through the stomach, and then, just as with the other flukes, in the duodenum, it exists, and the juvenile fluke now migrates to the lungs, again, behaving somewhat like fasciola, in that it becomes highly invasive. It burrows through the gut wall, across the peritoneal cavity, through the diaphragm, into the thoracic cavity, and then into the lungs, where it matures into an adult fluke. So again, another invasive stage to this life cycle that can actually cause overt disease. So here's a picture of a couple of adult flukes living in one of these cystic structures inside a piece of lung that's been cut open. And typically there are 2 or 3 flukes per cyst. So they communicate with the airways through a small fistula that allows the eggs to pass into the airway and then up the bronchial tree so that it can leave the body. What these organisms look like histologically, and again you can see this sort of fibrotic reaction to the presence of the flukes that form there, the walls of these cysts in the lung. So because of this invasive behavior of the larvae that occurs soon after infection, there is the potential for Paragonimus to cause acute disease, just like fasciola. Usually, this is asymptomatic. but disease can occur if a sufficient number of metasecaria are all ingested all at the same time. So the young migrating flukes can induce systemic signs, can result in diarrhea, pain, and eosinophilia. And when the young worms cross the diaphragm start penetrating the lungs, this can produce pain in the lungs, chest pain, and fever and chills. Typically, though, so that only happens if a lot of metasecaria ingested at once. The typical presentation, again, is that of chronic disease, and even people with light to moderate infections may be completely asymptomatic. Again, it requires a relatively high number of parasites for a person to actually present with overt disease. But when disease does occur, these patients present with a cough. There may be blood in their sputum, and there may be thickening of the pleury and presence of pleural effusion. And on X-ray, you see changes that look very much like tuberculosis. Okay, patchy infiltrates, nodules, and so on. In fact, as an example of somebody with Paragonimus-induced lesions in the lower lobe of the right lung over here, with treatment, the pathology seems to worsen. They killed the flukes with a drug, and they're now releasing antigens that actually induces even more inflammation. But gradually, over a period of several months, these lesions resolve. Now, because those larvae are highly migratory, there is the potential for them to end up in places where they shouldn't be. So they kind of miss the lungs and end up in other places, such as in the central nervous system or under the skin. Remember, when something's migrating through the body, the potential for it to end up in the wrong place is certainly there. So these are rare, these are exceptions, but they do occur. So diagnosis, again, usually depends on demonstrating the presence of eggs and parasitic feces. We'll have some examples of these for you to look at this afternoon. Again, a very large egg, not quite as large as that of Fasciola, but a substantial looking structure, again with an operculum at one end. And there are also serological tests that can be used to detect antibodies directed against Paragonimus antigens. Just some more pictures of eggs. And the recommended treatment, again, is praziquantel. Okay. Now some pictures then of the sorts of circumstances under which these infections are common. So typically infection is associated with highland areas. Many of these crustacea prefer to live in relatively flat, fast-flowing freshwater watercourses. And various species of crustacea can act as a source of infection. Here's a freshwater crab that is common in certain parts of East Asia that's used as a food source. Some more of these have been collected to prepare a meal. And crayfish, I mean, familiar with these as a food source depending on where you come from, even within the US, okay? And very often you see a large number of these look like freshwater crabs over here that have been collected. These are small, and so often you need a lot of them to make a meal. And often one of the ways in which they're prepared is that they're ground into a paste that's then used to flavor other things, and that isn't cooked, allowing the metasecaria to survive and end up causing an infection. Another way that sometimes these crustacea are presented is that they're simply sort of pickled in soy sauce or something similar. This again doesn't inactivate the metasecaria. And you may be familiar with this concept of jumping salad that's quite popular in parts of Asia. If you go on YouTube and just search for jumping salad, you see examples. There's basically live freshwater shrimp tossed with onions and spices, and it looks quite delicious, but yeah, potentially hazardous. All right. So, and I mentioned that there's a species found in North America. So, Paragonimus is present in North America, right? It infects various species of wild animals that typically feed on freshwater crustaceans, such as crayfish. Okay? And so raccoons and bobcats in North America harbor a species of Paragonimus, or Paragonimus calicata. Well, some colleagues of mine at Washington University actually identified a series of cases in college students in Missouri that presented with Paragonimus infection. And it turned out that on their spring break, they'd gone on some rafting trip in the Ozarks somewhere, and after drinking a lot of beer, they dared each other to eat some raw crayfish. Great idea, right? And they got infected with this species of Paragonimus. Okay, it's quite a big deal. So yeah, infection in North America anyway with Paragonimus. Risk factors for this are being male, in college, and
we've also started out. We're coming out of Hawaii. We're seeing an outbreak right now with rat lung fever that's attacking folks that are eating like lettuce and stuff from the home gardens. We have an invasive species of snail there on the islands that carry that parasite. I don't think it sets up in the humans as a host, but it actually invades the central nervous system and causes.
Right. So the parasite you're talking about is actually a nematode that's harbored by. It's normally a parasite of rats, but is transmitted by. Well, it's an intermediate stage that occurs in snail intermediate host. It actually happens to be a nematode. It's genus Cantonensis, which causes central nervous system disease. Okay, so I have a few slides on fasciolosis, the giant intestinal fluid. I think I'm going to skip talking about these and give you a break. You go for an hour. This organism is really not pathogenic. Okay? We talk about it because it's huge and there could be tens of millions of people infected with it, but it doesn't really cause disease. Essentially non-pathogenic. I think I'll let you look at those by yourselves on your own time. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll start on the schistosome. I really want to